mentioned before the letter, the epistle of Sherira Gaon.
Yes.
Of Sherira Gaon, and how important, what is the epistle in terms of more almost like a historical document that tries to tell us the formation of the Talmud.
Sure. So Rav Sherira Gaon is born roughly the year 906. He actually lives a century. He dies in the year 1006. I mentioned before that being a Gaon was not hereditary, but his father Rav Hananya was a Gaon. His grandfather Rav Yehuda was a Gaon. He claimed to descend from David HaMelech. At first, he was the Av Beis Din, the head of the Rabbinical court in Pumbedisa. He refused to recognize someone named Nehemiah ben Kohen Tzadok as the Gaon when he took the position in the year 960. Nehemiah had undermined the previous Gaon, and most of the sages did not accept him. Rav Sherira did not accept him. Nehemiah dies in the year 968, and Rav Sherira gets appointed as Gaon. He is the head of the yeshiva in Pumbedisa, and he works to really build it up. I mentioned before that by the time you get to the 9th century, and certainly the 10th century, the yeshivos are really in trouble. Financially, people are starting to develop centers elsewhere, and they're not funding the yeshiva, aside from not turning to the yeshiva with their questions. So he puts a major emphasis on creating classes for people outside of the yeshiva, soliciting the surrounding communities to send their questions to the Geonim. He does fundraising. He made some enemies. The year 997, he's already 90 years old. Enemies denounce him and his son, Rav Hai, to the caliph because he had connections to lands outside of the caliph's control. One of the major concerns for empires in those days was the fear of disloyalty, that their citizens might be looking to authorities outside their empire. Now, he did have connections to lands outside the empire because he had all his students and all the communities well beyond the caliph's reach. So he was imprisoned, and it really damaged his health. And he resigned as Gaon, and he made his son Rav Hai Gaon after him. In terms of the Igeres, in terms of this letter of Rav Sherira Gaon, so the community in Kairwan had a yeshiva, but the yeshiva was not at the level of the yeshiva in Bavel. It wasn't even at the level of the yeshiva in Israel. And they used to turn to the other yeshivot for guidance. So in the year 987, they send questions to Rav Sherira that are meant to combat Karaite type beliefs. So the questions include, we have a Mishnah, which is supposed to be ancient, going back to the Anshe Knesset Hagadola, the Great Assembly, towards the beginning of the second Beis Hamikdash. So why are all the names of the sages in the Mishnah from the students of Rabbi Akiva? And why is it that if there's no name, we say that's Rabbi Meir talking? They're all from the end. What about all these sages from all those generations? Where are they? Why do we always paskin like that last generation of the Mishnah? Who put the Gemara in the order it's in? Sometimes the Masechtot, the tractates of the Gemara, don't seem to fit a logical order. We have something called a Tosefta, which records texts that didn't make it into the Mishnah. Why wasn't that in the Mishnah? Why do we have it at all? Why is it adding to the Mishnah? How was the Gemara recorded? Who were the Savoroi I mentioned in the beginning of our discussion? All of these questions are sent to Rav Sherira, and he actually writes, there are multiple letters, but he ends up writing this Igeres to Rav Sherira Gaon, the letter of Rav Sherira Gaon, which is valuable both because it provides answers to these questions that we want to know about, and also because it provides a lot of detail that we don't have elsewhere. He provides names and dates for many of our leaders, Savoraim as well as Gaonim. He describes briefly some of the political issues like we saw with Rav Achai. We do have a couple of other historical records that show up later than this, but still in the period of the Gaonim, Seder Tanoim V'Amoraim, Seder Olam Zuta. But I think Igeres Rav Sherira Gaon is considered the greatest and the most reliable out of these works.